if you say, turn off the screens, go outside and play, and their response is, oh, there's nothing to do outside, or outside is boring, then ding, 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 they've been kept inside too much, and their imaginations is being squelched, because when, of course, with screens, there's no effort. They sit there just as passive observers, and so they haven't developed a imagination to see possibilities in the outdoors.
If you are looking to destroy your kid's imagination, you've come to the right podcast. Today, we are going to look at 10 ways to destroy the imagination of your child. Okay, all right. There was actually a little tweet thread on Twitter, now known as X.
Oh, I'm like,
I can't remember if I found this when it was on Twitter or when it had already changed to X. But it was from a guy named Anthony Esolen, who is an author. He's been the editor of Touchstone magazine. He is a professor in the humanities. He's a good Christian thinker. And he's got a book entitled 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child. In fact, I've got it right here. If you are watching, you can see the cover here, 10 Ways to Destroy Your Imagination, the Imagination of Your Child. I actually got this copy right here as a gift for Erin. This is one of your Christmas gifts. We always give books to each other for Christmas. This was this past year's one of your Christmas gifts. And but he also did this tweet thread where he just basically took the title of each of his chapters and then gave a little bit
sampling.
A little sampling. And we thought this would be great for us as parents to think through, because so much of modern life does destroy the imagination of our kids. Mm-hmm. And I think with that, we can think about, I guess, other virtues or characteristics that we want to see in our kids that are in the area as well. I think of something like initiative. Because when we talk about imagination, someone might just be thinking, they're daydreaming, or their dreams for the future, these grandiose plans for the future. But no, there's so much more that's related to this idea of imagination of our kids. Mm-hmm. And I think you'll get a flavor for this as we read through these things. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read kind of the headline, the way, one of the 10 ways to destroy the imagination of your child. Of course, obviously.
I was going to say, he's obviously being witty in his writing, which is very easy to read and enjoyable because he's very witty. And of course, no one wants to destroy their child's imagination. So of course, that's how he draws you in. And so by showing you how to destroy it, he's slowly teaching you how to actually cultivate it. And so that's why I think, his title and book is brilliant, and entertaining to read. And it's like, it convicts you, but you're laughing while you're being convicted. So that's at least makes the conviction enjoyable.
Yeah, so hopefully you guys will be laughing all throughout today's podcast. Okay. The first way to destroy your child's imagination. Number 1, keep your children indoors as much as possible. And he says a child weighed down by busy work, homework, endlessly distracted by flashing screens will find the outdoors boring. And so they will find life boring.
I love that point so much because modern children in general think outdoors is boring.
Oh, that's right.
And so if you say, turn off the screens, go outside and play, and their response is, oh, there's nothing to do outside, or outside is boring, then ding, 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 they've been kept inside too much, and their imaginations is being squelched, because when, of course, with screens, there's no effort. They sit there just as passive observers, And so they haven't developed a imagination to see possibilities in the outdoors. Like most of us grew up seeing. Most of us, when our parents said, go outside, we were like, okay. And because to us, that meant freedom, and it meant we could figure out stuff to do.
Explore.
And so,
Adventure.
and if anything, it was like, well, what time do we have to be home? You know, and we would stay out as long as we could, and we'd get in trouble for coming home, you know, after dark kind of thing. And so there didn't have to be this push to go out. Like we were playing outside.
Yeah. It's been turned on its head. Even if you do push them outside, kids then an hour later are back inside. Well, you know, what should I do? And now you have to be intentional about constantly pushing your kids outside, get them outside until they develop that habit and that taste for the outdoors.
Yeah.
And
this is something we fight too. Like our youngest is 12, and just the other day, a bunch of the boys from the neighborhood were all over, and it's like they get together, and then the first thing is, you know, our son comes, oh, Mom, can I play video games? All the guys they're all going to get on. It's like the middle of the day. It's a beautiful day. And I was like, absolutely not. Go there, you know, go be with all these human beings that are here. Tell them to play baseball or play football. Go in the cul-de-sac and play outside. No screens. And so this is a battle, you know, and we have had to push our kids outside. And so we relate to this push to not keep kids indoors as much as possible. It is the easy thing nowadays.
Yeah. Anthony Esolen goes on to say, anything they do should be virtual, not real. They should never feel the joy of discovering a real climbable tree. He says, life is to be spent inside the four walls of the house, the school, the office, and the hospital in preparation for the four walls of a coffin. All right.
And
you're supposed to laugh. I thought that was kind of funny what he said there, honey.
Well, I know, but I've already read it. Sorry. I was already like thinking ahead of what we're saying, how the way we grew up was so different.
Yeah.
And not just us. It's not like this is just like, since in the 1950s, this habit. I mean, children have been playing outdoors from the beginning of time. This is what children did. And so this really is a modern shift. This is a modern exchange that we've made. And we often don't think about, we've made this exchange, and we kind of just think it's neutral. We kind of think we're going to have the same result with these human beings as we've had with human beings before, even though we have completely changed what childhood looks like. And childhood now is spent, I mean, we know this from the studies, Gen Z, and then the younger kids underneath that, which we don't even have that much data on, but the Gen Z generation who spends 6 to 9 hours a day on screens. This is this big experiment we're doing on the kids, but we're expecting, I think we're just expecting, oh, well, they'll be like us, you know, they'll grow up with cultivated imaginations like we did. Even though we were playing baseball in the street and falling down and getting cuts and bruises, and their battling is all on the screen, and the cuts and bruises hardly ever happen because they're really not out there doing physical things.
Okay, so do you have a resource for parents on this?
Oh, besides the book?
Yeah,
besides this book?
Yeah, Esolen's book.
Well, I did pull out, yes, of course I do have a book that I like to recommend. Okay, so this book is one I've talked about before, and it is in my top 10 books, listener, of books that every parent should read. This is in my top 10. And it's called The Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. And it's written by Richard Louv, I think is how you pronounce his last name.
Louv.
Louv. And he wrote this many years ago. I got my copy, of course, at a used bookstore because that's where I like to buy my books. And when I found it, I was so excited. I was jumping up and down because I knew how good the book was because I'd read, snippets of it. Anyway, I have so much underlined and highlighted and tabs in this book. But The Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. And you're thinking, wait, what did he say? Nature Deficit Disorder. And so this book is, of course, talks about this shift that we have made in the childhood of our kids. Okay. And the deep effect it's having on them.
All right, so there's a resource for you on this one. Okay, we need to move to number 2 here. 10 ways to destroy the imagination of your child. Number 2, never leave children to themselves. And Anthony Esolen goes on to say, supervise and plan out their entire day. We don't really want them to be independent. Truly independent children grow up to be unmanageable adults. We only want adults who pretend to be independent. Oh, and then I like this. He says, children who can organize a pickup baseball game by themselves will grow up to be able to govern themselves. They become free men and free women, and we can't have that. We must drown them with notes from a planning committee. So never leave children to themselves. Erin?
I love that picture of the pickup game because I think about that when we were kids, and meeting at a park and you'd play a pickup game. And what you actually learn about needing to govern a community. And kids learn that because it's like you start calling foul or, hey, that's not fair.
You got to referee yourselves.
And so a government will be established on that baseball field or soccer field because it's like, hey, no, that you can't do that. And this is the rule and this is how we're playing. And this is how kids actually learn. Oh, yeah, there is some good to boundaries and things, but never leave the children to themselves. The modern American child is scheduled every hour of the day, and their days are planned out for them from, the time they wake up to how much time they have to eat breakfast. You got 15 minutes and then we got to go, and then school, of course, and then after school activities are all planned and scheduled, and then you got to get home and shower and eat dinner really quick, and then you've got to get to bed, or as they get older, then you've got homework and and every minute of every day is scheduled for kids nowadays. So you don't have what used to be just kind of kids roaming around the neighborhood riding bikes and stuff. You don't see that as much anymore because kids are scheduled. They've got appointments and things to do and are so overcommitted that they never are left to themselves to figure out what to do.
Well, and even if they're not every hour is scheduled, those unscheduled hours they're being babysat by a screen. Right. So then they're in playing video games or watching TV. And that is not leaving them to themselves. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think some parents might say, well, everything's not scheduled. Okay, well, but I guarantee that doesn't mean that then they're left to themselves. No, we will use the screen, the TV, the video games as kind of a sit-in for our babysitter. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about free time. Like push them outside and go. And that can foster the imagination because now you're forced to think about what you're going to do. And then when you go do that thing, whether it's a pickup game or whatever it might be, you can just see how that would stimulate the imagination of our kids. Mm-hmm. Okay, number 3, keep children away from machines and machinists. Okay, this is interesting. And here's what he says. He says, do not let them tinker. Safety must be valued above all else. Theoretical knowledge must be honored more than manual labor. Right? And so it's kind of that idea of like, don't give them a hammer and nails. Don't give them some wood. Don't give them, things to tinker on, machines.
Well, and he gives the example of animals too. So he says, teach them that whales need to be saved, but don't let them actually learn about whales or experience them, see them in real life kind of thing. So have it just be theoretical. Oh yeah, whales need to be saved. But they actually know nothing about whales and have never experienced, seen one swim, that sort of thing. And so this value of safetyism is what Jonathan Haidt talks about in The Coddling of the American Mind, that safetyism is now the number one value for parents. And so you could see how the value that everything has to be safe will then hamper what he talks about, tinkering, working with their hands, learning how to learning how to hammer a nail into wood.
Yeah, well, and you think about what our culture values. If you learned a trade versus you go to college and get a degree, well, what does the culture hold up as the higher value?
Yeah.
Right. And so Esolen goes on to say, no hunting, no raising animals, no table saws, no axes, no knives, no soldiering, no engines, no taking apart electronics to see how things work. Treat these things as beneath them. Your children are meant for something better. Government work. So a very witty way to.
So that reminds me, the tinkering time reminds me specifically of a story of Thomas Edison, who is one of the greatest inventors of all time. And I forget how many thousands of inventions Thomas Edison invented. But the story of him is when he was little, 8 or 9 years old, he kept getting in trouble in school. And he kept getting in trouble because, he was bored, basically. Albert Einstein had similar problems where he was a troublemaker in school. Okay, so what does Thomas Edison's mother do? Well, she gets a note home from the teacher saying that basically Thomas Edison, he's terrible to deal with, and he's basically dumb. He'll never amount to anything. This note from this teacher. So the mom decides to take him out of that school. And then what she did every single day is she gave him tinkering time, she would call it. And so he had this area in the basement where he could work with tools, and his mom let him just build and experiment and do things. And he becomes, as I say, one of the greatest inventors of all time. And it was because she called it tinkering time. And kids, this is almost unheard of with kids anymore.
Yeah.
That they would have the free time to even do something like that.
So there's another way to kill your kid's imagination. Number 4, replace the fairy tale with political cliches and fads. And he says fairy tales present evil stripped of any of its pretensions. It's ugly. It's gross. A child's moral imagination should not be trained with such stark truth. And then I like this. He says, boys should not be inspired to pick up a sword to slay dragons. That is too close to toxic masculinity. Better to raise them on cliches, right? And then fool children into thinking that they are virtuous because they believe the correct position on something they know nothing about. So that's what he means when he talks about replacing the fairy tales with political cliches and fads. And if your kids are on social media, they'll get a steady diet of the political cliches and fads. And this is where it's so good for us to have our kids reading fiction from the earliest of ages. And I think you've done a good job with our kids on that, where you've started them on a diet of good fiction.
Well, and you think about the classic fairy tales. Some of the best fairy tales of all time are these complicated stories of characters, and yes, good and evil are presented, but they're complicated stories, and they're characters. Usually, people, maybe a dragon, evil dragon that you slay, but but they're complex stories. I guess that's what. And so fairy tales, of course, feed the imagination of children because they present in beautiful ways story, and they draw children in, and they inspire boys to want to pick up the sword and slay the dragon, as you say. And yeah, that is a much more risky way to teach children ideas than just to tell them, oh, this is bad, this is good, and this is the way you should think.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is his point, because that's all that children are told now. A lot of children's books are just moral messages and they don't even make any effort to present it in a beautiful way. It's just like, you pick up this book, well, this is how you're supposed to act. This is how you're supposed to think.
Yeah. Okay, I am going to skip a couple. I'm going to skip number 5. So that means if you are listening to this and you're like, oh, shoot, I wanted number 5. I want the whole list. Go get the book. And Anthony will appreciate that from us. Okay, but number 6, cut all heroes down to size. Ooh. Inflate the word hero so it doesn't actually mean anything. Everybody is a hero. You didn't beep your horn when someone cut you off. You are a hero. Your mother made you dinner. She is a hero. Everyone is a hero.
Wait a second. I disagree with him.
You
on
didn't
that.
beep your horn when someone cut you off. Yeah, you're a hero.
No, the mom making dinner. I am a hero for that. Sometimes.
I'm like, I was thinking about your driving.
Oh.
Actually, for Erin, when she doesn't honk her horn at somebody, we do think that's heroic for her. No, but yeah, it reminds me of that scene in the Incredibles movie, right? Where the mom is saying, like, everybody's special, and the boy says, that means nobody's special. And that's the idea here. Cut all heroes down to size.
Yeah.
Everyone.
So, I think too, with this one, this is what we're seeing with modern day young people, is this, all heroes are coming, all of the, what we would think of as hero, like the George Washington statues, all the Thomas Jefferson, so all these things are being torn down, come down, because they have problems. And this actually bleeds into another one that he talks about, but it's so these people aren't heroes because it turns out they weren't perfect. And then we'll elevate instead. Like, you think about during COVID, how some people were called heroes because they, went to work or something. And COVID was a messy time. Okay. So, but it's just like, sometimes the way we throw around the term hero is a little bit silly.
Well, and we all get socialized by that.
Yes.
So you go along with it.
Mm-hmm. And so this sarcastic, like, not all heroes wear capes kind of thing, it is kind of a response to this, like, oh, everyone's called a hero. And instead of thinking about, no, there truly is heroic things to do. And so, yeah, in our culture, it's just like, oh no, everyone gets a ribbon. Everyone gets applauded. And then the people who have done heroic things, no, we're going to tear them down to the normal guy and kind of thing. And so, yeah, you don't want to read to your kids about people who have done heroic things, because there's tons of heroes just, all around us.
What you said, it got me thinking right now about how, we try to tear down heroes from the past. And this is not a good thing, where, you look at the founders and what is the criticism that's leveled at them. They were slave owners and they were racists. And we try to tear down some of the very good and heroic things they did. Now, obviously, we would say they are flawed men, and these actions were wrong, as if our heroes have to be perfect or heroic acts have to come from a perfect individual.
Yeah. Or if you acknowledge any good they've done, that there's this, that means you kind of worship the person for every single thing they've done.
In fact, his closing line on this cut down all heroes to size, he says, above all, teach your children to be flippant. If they spot excellence, they should sneer and nitpick. They should have nothing to be proud of, but should be able to scoff at humility. The only hero they should be allowed to worship is themselves. Wow. I mean, that is just, I think that's incisive for our cultural moment.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to skip number 7. Number 8, destroying your kid's imagination, level distinctions between man and woman. They are just individual carbon units. They should just grow up to be an adult with no greater ideal to strive for. It is dangerous for them to know that there is such things as manliness and womanliness. Ooh. There should be no rites of passages for boys so they know when they become men. There's nothing special about being a woman except that they can pretend to be third-class men. I mean, he's taken some aim at where our culture is at. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so level the distinctions between men and women.
Which obviously, I mean, we don't have to say a ton about this, but when you bring it back to his title about destroying their imagination, which is, their minds, feeding their minds with ideas, that's what, helping to develop their imagination does. And you think about how when you chip away, like he says, leveling the playing field, so it's kind of like we're all just the same. There's nothing distinct or good about being men, and there's nothing distinct or good about being women. How that just builds in us just kind of this apathy. Like there's nothing really to strive for, And
there's not different things that we bring to the table
to appreciate.
To appreciate and to work together. And I love what he says at the end. They should not discover that men and women working together, possessing deep virtues, tamed a continent. And this goes to, I mean, the example that you have shared before, like of Jamestown, right? And the men languishing. And then when the women came in, they started to thrive.
Mm-hmm. It was actually God's plan in the beginning, before sin, entered the world, that men and women would work together and that would bring about flourishing, that it wasn't good to just have man, just have woman, but actually we work best when we work together. And so this idea of taking away that there's anything distinct about those things, which I think sometimes is a reaction to one or the other not feeling like the distinctive things they bring is appreciated. And so then you think, well, I don't want to be that because it's just bad. Then, that can then nurture that. So that this is where the church needs to help in nurturing the appreciation of, like he said, manliness, womanliness, of what these things actually mean. That if we're made in God's image as distinctly male and female, that is good, and what's good about it. Yeah. And talk about that more.
Yeah. So not only is leveling those distinctions unbiblical, right? This goes against Genesis 1 and 2. It also will have an impact on the hearts and minds and souls of our children. Mm-hmm. Okay, we will not do number 9. You got to get the book on that one. But number 10, which maybe is a kind of covers all of them together, but he says, deny the transcendent. And I think there's some specific things to this point as well. I think in some of those other things, you are denying the transcendent. But deny the transcendent. Teach them that they are just the result of random chance. Nothing more than bags of chemical reactions. Imagination thrives on mystery and wonder. Make sure they have nothing to wonder about and no mystery that is inaccessible. So you take away the transcendent, mm-hmm. You reduce everything to the physical, right? So the story of evolution. Mm. This is where we could say this is a kind of maybe an aesthetic argument against evolution in terms of its impact on us. But how we view humanity, who we are, where we've come from, how we were created, or I guess, coughed out, that will have an impact on what you view humans to be, and then what we can do, achieve, accomplish, imagine, right?
Yeah, he talks about like a beautiful sunset, and once you maybe study the sun and its rotation and things like that, and he says a beautiful sunset becomes only, quote unquote, the light striking the atmosphere at a specific angle. And love is only an evolutionary impulse to reproduce. That this word only, he keeps saying only. God is only a projection of a wish fulfillment, something we have outgrown. And so this, like, we're able to explain things maybe or understand things partially, and so use that to kind of kill any kind of, like he says, the imagination thrives on mystery and wonder. And I love that, because to wonder about something means you realize I don't understand this fully, and I have to think about it and ponder it. Or you start to understand something and then you wonder about, okay, well, how is that connected to this? And then how is that connected to this? And then you start to wonder, and how did the whole thing start in the first place? But you won't do that without an imagination. You won't ponder the big mysteries of life.
Well, and you'll if you deny the transcendent, you're denying those big mysteries of life. So then you're stripping them of the motivation. There is no mystery and wonder to these things. So I think that kind of captures, kind of spills over into some of these other things. But I was thinking about just practically for us as parents. Like, I'm thinking young kids, right? If you have young kids who are still in the home, these are very applicable. But even, and not just in how, the activities you have your kids do, but even having them evaluate their education by some of this stuff. Like, what are they being taught at schools? They're being taught some of this stuff. They're being taught to deny the transcendent. They're being taught to say there's no distinctions between man and woman. They're being taught there are no heroes, or these guys aren't heroes, right? Kind of thing. This is a lot of modern secular education. And so modern secular education is stripping our kids of a godly and holy imagination that can imagine wonderful things about the life that God has created, and also what we can do and accomplish in this life.
Because if you misunderstand what human beings are and what we're made for and how we develop in healthy ways, then you're going to misdiagnose problems every time because you don't understand the thing itself, right? And this is where we've made this big exchange with children in how they spend their days. And we don't think about, in this exchange, what are we doing to our kids? And I think a good thing to think about is to think about from your 3-year-old to your 7-year-old to your 17-year-old, do they ever have quiet time where all they have to do is think? Do they ever have time where the music is shut off, they don't have their AirPods in, they don't have a TV show going, and it's just quiet, and they are left to their own reflections? And that's the big thrust of the book, is that kids are so distracted. They don't have the time that they need at this stage of life, and they desperately need it to just wonder and think. And, he talks about it in this, and in The Last Child of the Woods, same thing, this valuable thing called boredom for kids, and what it helps our minds to do when we, quote unquote, are bored, don't have anything to do, but we're left to our own thoughts. So do your kids ever have quiet time or open time to just wonder, to think up something to do. And the thing to do isn't something that's going to distract them from real life. It's actually going to bring them more deeply into it.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, don't say that we've never given you anything, folks. We just gave you 10 ways to destroy your kid's imagination. Okay.
Well, we only gave them like 7.
Well, we gave you 7 of the 10, but that's enough to destroy your kids and their imagination. Actually, what I'd love to hear from those of you, if you are watching on our YouTube channel, I'd love for you to comment in the comment section. What are some things that you have done to foster your kids' imagination? Because these are the things we want to protect against. And some of that, the flip side is, okay, here's what you intentionally do. But I would love to hear all the different ideas that parents or educators have that you have taken with kids and you've seen it be successful. What are the different ways in which you've helped foster their imagination? Leave some of those comments, because as people read those comments, it will, I think, spark some good ideas, and we'll interact with those comments as well. So, all right. So our encouragement is get Anthony Esolen's book, 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child, so that you don't destroy the imagination of your child.
Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.